Hello and welcome to Profiles in OSINT, a new series from District 4 Labs where we will interview leading voices in the open source intelligence industry and discuss how they use District 4 data. In today's episode with Chris Brenner from 221B Partners, we'll talk about everything from their work in the investigations and open source intelligence world to even Pina Coladas and bad romance novels. With that, here's Chris. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Albie.
Anytime. So just to give our viewers some background, Chris has recently been promoted actually to Associate Managing Director and Director of Technology at 221B. And he's been with the firm for a little over 2 years. Now, today we'll learn a little bit more about Chris and his career in the OSINT world, as well as 221B Partners, its work, and how they managed to use Darkside in their cases. So, Chris, to start, can you talk us through a little bit about how you found your way to 221B?
Sure. So I actually had previously worked with one of the firm's partners, Jennifer McAvack, at a prior company, and had been looking for a new opportunity, and happened to just kind of work out that I was able to find a place at 221B. And that's kind of one of the good things about the company is that we've all, in some way, shape, or form, worked with each other previously in other prior roles and prior companies, and we're all senior practitioners that bring a lot of experience and make a great team that works together.
Awesome. Love to hear it. And what sort of services does 221B offer, and what do you think sort of differentiates you guys from others in the industry offering similar things?
So we're a bespoke investigations firm, and we offer a wide variety of services from traditional due diligence, background investigations, litigation support, threat investigations work. And, really, we're in the business of finding and distilling information for whatever the end client's needs are. And that's where we, sort of find our role and help support that.
I like to hear that. And how's the culture at 221B too? You like it?
It's great. Like I said, we've all sort of overlapped at differing points with each other at prior companies and in prior roles. And so, we all work well together. We're all familiar with each other, and we're friends outside of work too, honestly. It's a great environment to be in. So
growing up, let's say in college, were you aware of the private sector intelligence industry or investigations? Was that something that was sort of in your aim, or how did you come to find out about it? So
that's a great question. Sort of, but not really. I was kind of aware of the retail theft investigations and insurance type stuff. But, I wasn't fully aware of sort of the breadth of what the private sector investigation and intelligence roles looked like. And really, since I've graduated from college, that space has changed drastically, as technology's evolved and as, needs of different clients have changed and evolved over time as well. I ended up in this role sort of by luck, sort of by fate, maybe. I needed to complete an internship for my final semester of college, and I kind of drug my feet, hadn't selected where I wanted to go, was thinking, maybe go intern with some law enforcement agency somewhere, maybe in some corporate security type role. But one of my classes, second to last semester, had a couple of guest speakers from a somewhat local to Chicago private investigations firm, and they came and talked about what they did in surveillance and background investigations, and kind of at the time sort of budding OSINT work that wasn't very clearly defined as what it is now. And to me, it sounded a lot like what my idea of what maybe being a detective at some law enforcement agency would be like, or maybe sort of working for the FBI, and just intrigued me enough that I thought, okay, well, I don't have any other better ideas, so let's go intern at this company. And I learned surveillance, I learned background investigations work, public records, commercial databases and that sort of thing, and was able to leverage that into, a role after that, doing more of that, insurance investigations work for a number of years, and then into the more, corporate consulting side of things, and eventually where I am now at 221B.
Yeah, you spoke a bit about how it's changed the industry, and especially I can speak for myself that it was a little bit difficult for me as somebody to try to enter into the industry, to find that sort of jumping point. Is there any advice you'd give, maybe that reflects some of the changes that have happened in the industry lately, that would make it easier for somebody? How would you go about suggesting that somebody gets involved with the industry?
So I would say one of the biggest things that would set, somebody apart if they're looking to, enter into this industry is to be curious, be eager to learn, and be willing to and eager to, adapt to technology. When I started in this career path, 15 years ago, MySpace profiles were still useful and relevant. And I can't tell you the last time I found a MySpace page that actually had any sort of content on it. As social media has become ever present, as, different avenues for open source information have, made themselves available on the internet, as companies and data providers have been breached, and that information has come out there. There's just an endless array of information that you can attempt to find and distill into something useful for your end client. And being able to adapt to that and leverage that is really key. And even to just, be fluent with, technology and even something as simple as Excel, being able to take FEC contribution data for politicians and quickly break out some pivot tables and, make sense of a large amount of information quickly is super helpful in some cases, and is a skill that, I've seen both lacking in some places and also I've seen it, be extremely valuable to, individual cases or to teams that are trying to accomplish tasks. You could even go so far as to learn some basic coding and scripting skills and, use regex to be able to extract information from large data sets. That type of curiosity and application of technology, I think, is what really would help somebody go far in the OSINT, space particularly. And like I said, just be inquisitive, be willing to, be challenged and solve problems and find information.
It's great advice. I wish I had it when I was trying to come up through. Awesome. Yeah, that actually leads really well too. What is it that really excites you about the OSINT industry or investigations? What's something that you kind of look forward to doing every single day?
Yeah, it's what I just said. It's solving problems. It's, finding a box of puzzle pieces and not knowing what the end result looks like, and putting that together and using technology to do it, whether it's, scraping information from social media or, using software like Multigo with Darkside to, do link analysis and pull data together from a bunch of disparate sources and pivot from one thing to another. I sort of just have this like innate drive to know all of the secrets to everything, and working in the investigations and OSINT space helps kind of further that by being able to, whether it's find, secrets is kind of a bad word, but like find that information for the client that maybe they don't know, but it's out there and it's ready to be discovered. You just have to know how to find it. So that's sort of what, really interests me and helps drive me.
Yeah, it's like one big puzzle, but all the pieces are sort of hidden and you have to pull them together yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you enjoy about sort of being on the consulting side of things rather than in the corporate sector?
In the consulting side of things, I think one of the big advantages is no client and no case is ever the same. In 1 week, I can work on a due diligence case for private equity. I can help a law firm examine thousands of IP addresses from a subpoena production. I can, work on a threat investigation, help identify an unknown bad actor that's making threats to somebody. And, it's only Wednesday at that point. Things are constantly changing, and, it's just a wide variety of work that allows me to see into a bunch of different industries, whether it's the educational space, manufacturing, law firms, private equity, Fortune 500 companies, healthcare. It runs the gamut in terms of client types, and, being able to get a little bit of a taste of everything without having to, spend a few years in one industry and then go to the next. It really lets you kind of just absorb a lot of experience from a lot of different places at once.
Something different every day. So you've spoken on investigations and OSINT in the past. I know at the Osmosis conference, elsewhere as well. What are some emerging trends that you see within the industries?
I think definitely the big buzzword right now is AI, artificial intelligence. I think once that's able to be harnessed in a reliable fashion to analyze and distill and break down information from a variety of sources, whether it's feeding, PDFs of court records to be analyzed or, SEC records, election contributions, that sort of thing, and be able to get instant or near instant feedback and analysis and look for, specific key, trends, and maybe you're looking for a specific subject within, a document set or something. That type of application, I think, is going to be very, very beneficial once, again, it's reliable. And in my testing and playing around with ChatGPT and Bard and some other providers, it's not quite there yet where I would trust it to do the full sort of battery of analysis that somebody in this industry might do. But I think we're getting close to it.
Close.
I don't think it's going to be 10 years. It might not be next year, but it will be pretty soon. And I think it'll be a very disruptive force multiplier within the industry. And whether that's good or bad, I don't know yet. Yeah. But that's one of the big things I think is going to be an emerging trend on the case type perspective. One of the things that we've seen an uptick in lately, and just sort of generally across the country and the globe is financial fraud, and specifically things like pig butchering, on the whether it's traditional wire fraud or crypto based real estate fraud, that sort of thing. There's been a big uptick in that, and it's a $1 billion plus industry for criminals, and it's not going to go away. So unfortunately, I think, there's a lot of scammers out there and a lot of would-be victims. And unfortunately, that some of that work's going to, coming our way.
Yeah. Continue getting bigger too. I know every year more and more, or every year there's been a larger amount of money stolen through financial crimes, and I'm sure it's not slowing down anytime soon. And so how do you use Darkside in your work? What are some use cases that you've seen? The data has helped out a lot recently.
So Darkside, we've employed it in almost every case that we have since we started using the product. It really shines in sort of, you don't know what you don't know, and kind of uncovering some of those hidden layers when it comes to either identity resolution or, different places to pivot to, whether it's email addresses or phone numbers or things that are of interest to people, whether it's things like the, MGM data breach that might suggest either, some interest in gambling or at least travel to places where, MGM properties exist. There's, a bunch of different data sets that involve, tiny little forums across the internet that, are catered to one interest or another that might shed some light on what somebody's, personal habits are like or what their hobbies and interests are. And so, it just is another layer of information we can apply to a case, whether it's, background investigation or one of the things that we've seen it really excel with is for threat investigation work, where we often have a client who's receiving emails or text messages from an unknown contact. And maybe it's some voice over IP number that isn't, immediately associated with a normal carrier, or it's an email address that they created on, Hotmail or Gmail or somewhere that they haven't used in their personal life anywhere else. But maybe it got caught up in some data breach where we can correlate maybe a unique password to it, or maybe an IP address that is also associated with a different data breach that points to a real name and a real email address and a real phone number. And so, that's some of the ways we've been leveraging it. But like I said, it's part of that, you don't know what you don't know. And it's information that people never thought was going to be public in the first place. So there tends to be a lot of shadier, uses and shadier places where people have maybe signed up for an account like Ashley Madison or Adult Friend Finder that, perhaps they never thought anybody would know about. But, as data breaches occur and that information becomes public, it just furthers our ability to find those potential skeletons in the closet. Whether they're relevant or not is sort of up to the client to decide. It might not matter in some cases that somebody has an Adult Friend Finder, account or did, back when they were breached. But, there's some puzzle pieces there that might unlock other aspects of that person's life that may end up being a fruitful rabbit hole to go down.
So you talked about the puzzle. We go back to that very often in OSINT, and Darkside really is just one piece of the puzzle. And that's usually not going to solve the entire puzzle. But when you start to bring other pieces together, other data sources, you find that they complement breach records very well. What are some of those data sources that you also use?
Sure. So, looking at those, email addresses and phone numbers and physical addresses and other, IP addresses and that sort of thing, we can easily pivot to tools like Shadow Dragon's SocialNet to do social media intelligence and pull back Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and other profiles there that maybe weren't apparent from doing manual searches on the platform. People tend to use, weird names sometimes and, don't want to be found. And our job often is to find the unfindable. So, Darkside can help with that front. Pivoting to IP addresses and other emails and things, you can use domain tools and whois lookups to pull back information related to websites or other networking information, depending on, the scenario. And it also just helps us to, complement traditional platforms like TLO and Lexis and Westlaw, where, maybe a comprehensive report didn't pull back a phone number related to a subject, but we found something new on Darkside. Well, if you run that, maybe we unlock some more information through one of those platforms. Sometimes it just provides additional jurisdictions, based on some addresses that may show up that, maybe we go and do public records court research in a new place we didn't know about yet. And maybe we find something interesting there, maybe not. So it's kind of unlocking that unknown and trying to, gather as much information as we can and sort of make sense of it.
In what capacity does Darkside fit into a workplace violence investigation or a threat assessment?
So like I'd mentioned before, oftentimes we are brought into threat investigation work where somebody is receiving communications from an unknown threat actor. And we have an email address or a phone number or, maybe some other disparate piece of information. And so, through those traditional investigative databases and through Darkside, we can often find information that points back to who that person may be. Maybe we find that phone number in a data breach that is recent enough that it, seems like it might be a viable path to go down, and it's tied to a real name or a real email address, and we can kind of dig some more on that and see if that's the right person that we're looking for. The other thing too is that there's a number of different types of data sources within Darkside, whether it's large data breaches like LinkedIn and Twitter and those things, or little tiny forums on the internet where, maybe we find something related to, interest in, say, like military or weapons or that sort of thing. And, we can kind of assess whether that person may pose a risk. Maybe it gives some kind of sign that, they have access to weapons that, would be of note to relay to our client and to involve law enforcement with. And really just help to gather as much information as we can to provide the client and provide, the stakeholders involved with as broad of a picture of who they're dealing with as possible.
Yeah, a lot of the context of the different data sources is almost as helpful as the identifiers themselves.
Absolutely.
Sometimes. Yeah. I've been told that you had a recent case that involved breach credentials and Pina Coladas. Could you go a little bit more into that?
Sure. So we had a client who, unfortunately, they suffered a large financial loss due to some credit card fraud. And, by examining some of the transactions that were fortunate enough to include actual ticketing name information on some flights, we were able to pinpoint a few suspects via social media who may have been part of that fraud, and they decided to travel around to Cancun and to Europe, and it was on our client's dime. And one of the things that sort of is an interesting use case with Darkside, in that aspect, is not only the trying to figure out who the bad actor is with those data points, but we also leverage the Darkside data to help assess the exposure of the victim. Is their social security number floating around out there? Was the credit card number somehow compromised, in a breach record? Could you piece together their security questions based on information that is floating around the deep and dark web? And so we use that to help kind of gain a picture of not only who is the potential bad actor and what is the extent of the exposure of the victim to help them sort of manage and mitigate that risk in the future going forward. In a different financial investigation, sort of similar circumstances, but I was able to identify through some information that a scammer was using via email addresses, and found an obscure data breach hit for a like cell phone routing forum, where you're unlocking cell phones to do whatever, whether it's you want to install pirated apps, or you just don't like Apple knowing your business, whatever it is. But the interesting part was that there was an IP address tied to it, and that IP address, once you pivoted to that and ran some more searches to see where that was associated with, was dozens of email addresses associated with breaches on Wattpad, which is a sort of a like fiction story sharing platform, kind of like Goodreads, but a little bit different. And the interesting part was that the IP address was related to a Nigerian ISP, and all of the Wattpad users had 2, 3, 5, half dozen saved stories in their accounts, all just bad romance. And so I would assume that the situation there is that those users were reading through these, bad romance novels and, building their backstory and finding some conversation points to help further their conversations along with the people they were scamming. So that was an unexpected but very interesting find through the Darkside data.
Very clever of them, honestly.
Yeah, I do have to give them a tiny bit of credit for trying to find the backstory there and not have to do too much thinking on their own.
Well, Chris, thank you very much. Had a great time and was really glad to hear more about some of the different cases and how you've been using Darkside. If you want to learn more about 221B Partners, you can go to their website at 221bpartners.com. If you want to learn more about Darkside, you can go to district4labs.com. That's been our episode. Looking forward to the next one. Thank you.